Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Frank Sullivan. We're here at Digital Craftsman with a very special guest, Paul Orrick, our technical director. Paul, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about some of the deadly sins around cloud adoption. And the first one that we're set to talk about is cloud sprawl. What is cloud sprawl, and why do we think it's one of the 7 deadly sins of cloud?
Yeah, when most people talk about cloud sprawl, they're worried about cost. They're worried about the bottom line cost of the instances. What have we got left running? What have I left over the weekend? What are my developers doing? Are they running on some massively large instance that they don't need to be? And that can add up to quite a significant cost. However, actually the bigger problem with cloud sprawl is one of security. Because if developers have left a development database instance that's wide open to the internet and then moved on to another project, or if we have a backup of a database that's come from UAT, maybe it came from live, maybe they didn't wipe all of the live data and they've just left it lying around in a S3 bucket as part of the development process. Publicly open, and then they've moved on. Again, those sorts of things we discover in some of the audit work that we've done for our clients. And that's your bigger problem with cloud sprawl is the stuff you don't know about, the stuff that's been left behind, because the cost of running your instances, a few extra high power instances for a few weeks trying to find those, the cost of those pales into insignificance when you consider GDPR fines and reputational damage.
It does, and that's quite a scary point. I wasn't really prepared to think about how deeply of a risk it is. What we typically lead with is, savings, 30 to 40% by right-sizing infrastructure, by
Absolutely.
looking at the pricing tariffs on demand versus capacity reservation, by looking at orphan snapshots and rationalizing what you're running.
Yeah.
At no point have we ever talked about the operational side of this when it comes to tagging and deployment, or most importantly, how that 30 to 40% operational cost saving compares to a major security breach.
Yeah. And those things that you've mentioned, in particular things around tagging, around understanding what your instances are used for, what the database instance, what project these relate to, when they were brought in. It's kind of why one of our biggest recommendations to clients is around a configuration management database.
Yes.
So that you understand where every single item in your infrastructure has come from, what it's used for, who's responsible for it. And then that means that as you go through the project lifecycle, as you shut these machines, as you shut down development instances of projects, as you bring new projects in, it means that you can make sure that you've actually shut down the right instances, you've shut down the right database instances, and that you leave nothing behind, that you've closed all the buckets, you've closed all the loops. In particular because, well, one of the metaphors that I've used in the past is that it's no good putting all the bolts and locks on a front door if you've left all the windows open. One of the classic ways that live environments are hacked into now is by people finding development versions of the environment, or old UAT versions of the environment, going in, looking around, because it's not usually secured, because it's the development environment and no one's bothered about it. But by definition, a development or UAT environment tends to work in the same way as the live environment. So if someone can get into the development or UAT environment and look around it, they can say, okay, fine, so they have web servers here, that's the database server, that's accessed like that. And obviously, especially if you've got configuration data that may go through, it gives people some nice, easy ways into the live environment. So, people worry about 2FA and those kinds of things, but actually, you've got to make sure that the whole thing is as sealed down as possible, and that requires good configuration management. It requires good deployment practice. It requires all of those things to kind of come together to make sure that you're doing things in the right way, because otherwise you're leaving yourself wide open.
it sounds like a lot of this, this mess of sprawling infrastructure can easily be prevented if people follow a set of rules.
That's right, yeah.
But who wants to play by the rules? Move fast and break things, right?
Well, that's certainly one way of looking at it. And, you know, a few years ago, that was the main way of doing it. I mean, you look at how Facebook and Amazon and all of the rest of them, how fast they've progressed. But even they got to a point where they realised that they're just, unless you actually get some structure around how you do development, how you push things to live, how you ensure that your live environment is operating safely and securely, that you end up exposing yourself to far more risk than you're even perhaps aware of. So certainly some of the things that we've looked at around cloud sprawl in the articles, in the online articles and other videos, those things really are key to make sure that you're actually doing things in the right way, and that you're not leaving yourselves open unexpectedly.
Well, it sounds like this server sprawl, cloud sprawl problem is actually a symptom of bad management or mismanagement at the earlier stage. You turn something on, you forget about it, rinse and repeat.
Yes, I think rather than mismanagement, I think it actually comes down to companies nowadays wanting to get into the cloud, wanting to roll out a cloud infrastructure, it being a new fun thing that people tend to rush into to do, and rather than mismanagement, which implies a knowledge or sort of a lack of negligence. Thank you. It's more about the fact that people haven't been able to adapt their old way of thinking about things and the old IT structure, the processes and controls around it. They haven't been able to adapt it for how the cloud works.
Well, that's a problem. It's a problem.
It is a problem.
It's a big problem.
It is a big problem. But there are certain things that we've put forward, suggestions and some of the structures and things that you can put in place just to ensure that you at least have some reporting and control over these. Tagging is a great example of that. Being within Azure, AWS and all the others, you can tag every single instance with as many tags as you want. I mean, obviously you can over tag things, and that just can create just as bad a problem as not having enough. But certainly tagging is a great way of understanding what the instance or database version is for, when it was put in, what project it's part of, and by doing all of those together and grouping them together, you can actually really help understand where your project is going and what should be up, what should be down, and what should be shut down.
It sounds basic, but very few organizations actually practice this properly, if any. I think, coming back to your old point around the way things used to be done, you and I, throughout our careers at different places, we've seen behavior where centralized IT or the centralized procurement of IT services has dramatically slowed the pace of innovation. For example, it takes 3 months to get approval for a virtual machine. And one of the psychological or behavioral byproducts of that within the company is shadow IT. Yeah. Where, obviously not us, we see eye to eye, but somebody like me has been stopped from doing their job by somebody like you at big company X, Y, and Z, which has forced me. Let's say I want to create a new campaign microsite. On behalf of the marketing department, I want to go and put up a new website, right? I need a web server, and I need a CMS, and I need an environment in order to do that. But procurement said maybe, and they're too slow, and I can't get a VM for 3 months, but after 3 months, the campaign will be dead anyway. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to AWS, I'm going to give them my credit card, I'm going to let my front-end developer spin up an EC2 instance, stick a WordPress image on there, and go wild. And then you know what? In hindsight, we were both right and we were both wrong in that scenario. I was right because we had to go and run that campaign and we made money off that campaign, but in hindsight, I forgot about that machine, or we forgot about that machine, and it went on to become a security risk 6 months later. Point is, short-term win for long-term gain versus long-term win
Yeah.
for short-term pain.
And that's why by the way, a lot of some of the even the bigger companies now have kind of embraced the idea of the cloud and cloud technology, and really use things like tagging and other lambda functions and those kinds of things to really make sure that they're empowering their smaller departments to be able to make those kinds of decisions and to be able to run things up and run things down. The FT is a great example of this, because when they started a few years ago and they were running all their instances in the cloud, they were running several hundred instances for different environments and different parts of the company.
No kill switch.
With no kill switch, but all under one AWS account. So they had something like 50 people all able to access the AWS account, and there was a lot of trust that you wouldn't go in and mess with other things. They had some incidents because of that, and in the end, the way they did it was they ended up with a centralized billing account. They then gave each department, each area, each business service its own AWS account under that, with certain people having admin and other people below that. What the IT team then did was they then put in a layer of administration and automated checking. So from what I understand of it, they've now got a system that will go through and ensure that every single AWS resource in every single AWS account has met certain criteria tags. It has to have a project name, it has to have a department name, it has to have the name of the person who's in charge of it, and that person has to be a valid user within FT. So by putting this layer of control in, by saying, right, you have, and they send a report round to those kind of the project heads within each department saying, right, you have 7 instances, the oldest one is this, here's how much they cost. So they kind of generate a cost report, and that goes around every month. So it's a way of, I think, because you're actually forcing the information onto the sort of department heads and project heads, it actually makes controlling it much easier.
But it could have gone the complete opposite direction. We could have turned off public cloud altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they've realised the cost savings that are available through public cloud, and the speed of development that's available through public cloud, and that they've found a way of embracing it, and this idea of the IT allowing departments to run their own projects while also giving a business service the tools to be able to run that project, about being able to make sure that it is secure. Again, they have scripts which go through and they check all of the security groups within AWS and make sure that people haven't left large holes everywhere. If they have, they email them. It's a sort of an automated email that goes out to them, and people have to respond to that. They look at the tags and say, right, these machines aren't tagged. If they are not tagged within 7 days, we will shut them down. And then 24 hours before it happens, we will be shutting these machines down in 24 hours because they are not tagged. And it just goes in and shuts them down. And it's about that. It's about that empowerment. It's about security through empowerment. That I think is, that's really a great message to be able to give to people, because it will help stop cloud sprawl from a security perspective. It stops cloud sprawl from a cost perspective, because obviously these the department heads are very aware of how much each of these things are costing them. This automated email also makes suggestions. It pulls things out from AWS's from CloudTrail and from the Cloud Health to kind of make suggestions on how cost savings can be done. You've got this RDS instance, you've had it for several months, it's been the same size. if you go to a reserved instance, it will only cost you this. So it's about empowerment.
Is there somewhere we can read about this setup?
The FT article, it was actually a lecture that I went to, a presentation by someone within the FT on a CI/CD lecture. So yes, I imagine there's an article somewhere.
We should certainly write a follow-up to this. It's a pretty binary outcome.
It is a very binary.
You have one incident that leads to a repressive crackdown and firing of elements that just wanted to innovate and do what they do best, versus actually understanding the behavior, not just the technical implementation, but understanding the behavior behind that shadow IT and behind that cloud sprawl all these years later. And it's a novel use case where you're looking at digital identity and better labeling as a way to actually save costs in the long term.
Humans will always find a way around the system if they don't understand why the system is in place. I mean, it's the nature of who we are and what we do. We're always looking for a better way, a faster way, a more innovative way of doing things. You know, why climb the mountain? Because it's there. It might be dangerous, it might be it's ridiculously dangerous, but I want to do it because I can.
Some of us say, you invent a better system, they invent a better idiot.
Well, exactly right. Exactly
It's
right.
an alternative interpretation.
No, it is, absolutely. And that's exactly why I like the way the FT dealt with it. Is, people are going to want to do this anyway.
Yeah.
So let's give them the tools,
Yeah.
which means that they can do it in a safe, structured, controlled manner, that we know what's happening within it, they know what's happening within it, and we can ensure that it's done in a safe way.
And there are other parallels to other industries that, it's like, let's legalize and cloud, we're not going to go down that particular path.
No. I think cloud is one of those things where you can do it really right, or you can do it really wrong. And when you do it really wrong, and you don't think about the implications of it, it can go horribly wrong. So cloud spaces.
Workspaces.
No, code spaces.
Code spaces.
Sorry. Code spaces is a classic example of that. They had all of their backups, they had all of their virtual machines, all of their user accounts, all in one AWS account, which is not a great idea. What they then had was on their root account within AWS, they didn't have any multi-factor authentication and a fairly easily guessable password. So someone went in, they logged in as root, they guessed their password.
Everything in the kitchen.
And then they had access to everything. They had access to all of the live instances, all of the live databases, and all of the backups, snapshots, the whole lot. And not only did they take the user data, they then went in, and the way they hid their steps was to delete everything. So they deleted the machines, they deleted the backups, they deleted the snapshots, everything. And that's your entire company. Your entire company
Gone overnight.
is gone. Well, in seconds.
Seconds.
You can literally select all, delete. That's a classic example of doing cloud badly, because again, there are things that we've been pushing, that we've been suggesting as well. Create a second AWS account that only certain people have access to. Enforce MFA on it throughout. Only give certain people access to it, and make all your backups. All your backups should then be dumped into an S3 bucket that is owned by that account. So even if your main account is hacked in some way, all of your backups are safe in another account that they don't have access to.
I understand this instinctively. We're both in this, but I want you to say that again for those that are less technical in the audience. You're saying that through no fault of their own, or through not having a policy around labeling, or not having that approach, that it is possible for someone to guess a password and with 2 clicks of a button, select all, delete, effectively turn off a multi-million or perhaps even a multi-billion pound company with the click of a mouse in seconds.
Yeah.
That's pretty terrifying.
It is. Certainly, if your root password is known to many people, if you're not using multi-factor authentication on your root password or even on all the user passwords, if you have lots of users who all have full admin access to your account, then yes, any one of those accounts could be hacked, or disgruntled employee leaves, or he could have written the password down, or anything like that. If someone can get into your AWS account, it is as simple as select, delete. It can take anywhere between a few seconds to a few minutes, depending on how much you've got. But if they're doing it at 2 in the morning, by the time you've gone in there, what are you going to do? So that's, again, it's one of the reasons why backups are so critical, why understanding how you use snapshots is incredibly critical, why using multi-factor authentication is critical, why password rotation is critical, why making sure that you've only given the right admin level privileges to the right people who are fully trustworthy and who aren't going to do anything career ending. That's why this stuff is so critical, because it can, not just end a career, but end a company.
I think what people fail to recognize is how quickly it can happen. When we think of a company failing quickly, we think of the financial crisis and the months it took for Lehman Brothers to go down, or the months it takes for a government department to be restructured. Here we are talking about seconds.
Yeah, seconds.
Seconds and a mouse click, or maybe bash script, but...
No, it can all be done in a few mouse clicks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you need to make sure that you know where your backups are, that they're held in a separate account, that you're using multi-factor authentication, that you're using a system of rotation passwords, that you've got admin users who are doing the right things, and that your security groups are set up correctly. It's exactly the kind of thing that our audit tool is designed to do. That, not only the audit tool, but actually our view coming in and looking at things and going, okay, well, you need to add this and change this and do this in order to make sure you've got a business tomorrow.
Paul, thank you very much for your time. This has been one of the most enlightening and insightful 20-minute videos that we get to do in this series, and it's a real pleasure to have you. But it is also truly the scariest video that we've had to record. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.